back to the Daily Grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back pickle biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
Spicy. Oh, that's just fucking hilarious. Who remember those commercials from back in the day? George St. Pierre is looking slower than ever according to Robert Whittaker. And I fucking love this because a lot of people assume that Robert Whittaker wouldn't be able to sell a fight versus George St. Pierre. They assumed that he would be too respectful, and George St. Pierre and Robert Whittaker are both too respectful to sell a fight to each other. And I just think that's a little bit of a stretch. Like, I mean, do you have to have somebody talking major trash versus somebody respectful? Does it have to have every fucking fight? I don't think so. Every championship fight, every money fight. I mean, and then if you look at UFC 217, somebody said they wanted to hear my thoughts on this. All the trash talkers lost at UFC 217. It's interesting. Is it a coincidence? Possibly. I mean, Conor McGregor's a trash talker. He didn't lose versus Aldo. So, I mean, are you saying like it's the age of trash talkers losing? One thing that you could say about that is, were the people at UFC, well, yeah, I don't think that has anything to do with them trash talking. I mean, because Michael Bisping's a natural trash talker. So I was going to say, you know, are they natural trash talkers? Are the people at UFC 217 that all lost, were they people trying to play a role that wasn't their character, so they were out of their element, which played into the fight? And you can't say that because Michael Bisping's a guy who talks trash. He did the same thing versus Luke Rockhold, different results. So I really don't think that the fact that all the UFC all the trash talkers at UFC 217 lost, you know, is a big tell on what's to come. Like, oh, you know, everyone that talks trash is going to lose all their fights from here on out. I don't think that's the case. And I mean, trash talk, like whenever you hear somebody like Darren Till talk, you know, would you consider that trash talk when he's just confidently saying, hey, I'm too big for Donald Cerrone. I'm going to go in there and I'm going to knock him out. I'm too big for him. And then he does it. Is that trash talk or is that confidence? You know what I'm saying? So it's really, I don't think it had anything to do with the trash talk. Now, Cody Garbrandt, and I mean, was Cody Garbrandt really like talking trash, or was he kind of like, you know, more, you know, there's levels to trash talk. So yeah, I don't think it's really got much to do with the trash talk for the reason the people lost at UFC 217. But I mean, trash does help sell fights, but I don't think it's necessarily necessary to sell every single fight. You know, I think Robert Whittaker versus George St. Pierre would still sell very well. I just think it'd be an amazing fight. I think you could get people on board. Robert Whittaker's got Australia behind him. You know what I'm saying? What are you saying? You know, when they talk about people having their hometown or home countries or continents behind them, Robert Whittaker's got people behind him, and he's got a lot of other people behind him. I think that fight would sell. I mean, you can let me know what you think in the comments, but I would fucking love Robert Whittaker versus George St. Pierre. And hey, look, here's Robert Whittaker saying that he thinks George St. Pierre looks slower than ever. I'm going to read what Robert Whittaker had to say because it's pretty fucking spicy, if I must say. Robert Whittaker, all right. He was doing an interview, I believe, with Fox in Australia, Fox Sports, and he said, if George St. Pierre steps down, it makes everybody a potential opponent. You know, so he's saying, you know, a lot of people are talking about the fact George St. Pierre might not fight Robert Whittaker next. He might be looking to go take Tyron Woodley's belt, take the welterweight belt, and then maybe have a fucking mega fight with Conor, the champ versus the champ. I mean, I'm just saying. So he's saying if George does step down, it makes everyone a potential opponent. And Robert Whittaker is fine with that. He's not a guy that's coming out here and complaining like, oh, George is scared of me. He's trying to dodge me. He's not saying that. He's willing to fight people if GSP does step down. It could be Luke Rockhold. It could be Weidman. It could be a number of guys at this point. Well, actually, not really. It'd probably be Rockhold at this point, but Robert Whittaker said also, he continued to say if George St. Pierre doesn't step down, he said, to be honest, he looks slower than he's ever been. He's just as crafty. You can see the intelligence is still there. His fight IQ is still there. He obviously hits harder at middleweight, but I hit hard and I hit fast. And I punch much harder and faster than Bisping, and I have much better defense than Bisping, so it looks good. Let's fucking go. How is that not selling a fight? You know, people, when you talk about Robert Whittaker versus George St. Pierre being too respectful, that's part of selling a fight. Mayweather-McGregor, part of the reason Mayweather-McGregor sold so well is because Mayweather convinced convinced us McGregor has a chance. It wasn't because every time he seen McGregor, he was saying, he's got no chance, he's never boxed, I'm gonna beat him up. He was saying, I am older, I am, you know, he is he is talented, he is the best at what he does. That sells a fight too. And then you throw in a little bit of the trash talk, but he did look slower than ever. I hit harder and faster than Bisping. You know what I'm saying? So I fucking love it. So you can't tell me Robert Whittaker versus George St. Pierre won't sell. And as far as Dana White's concerned and George St. Pierre, they're both leaning toward Robert Whittaker because it's in the contract. That's what George St. Pierre said. It's in my contract. I must defend versus Robert Whittaker, you know, unless the bosses change that. And Dana White has said it's going to be Whittaker. The only two real possibilities as far as I'm concerned are Whittaker and Woodley, because I mean, unless you're talking about Conor coming back up to 170, which would mean he's got to vacate his belt because he would be taking a fight outside of 155 if this was his next fight. He would have to, because there's no way GSP's going from 185 down to 155 after putting on all that muscle. So Conor would have to vacate his belt and go up to fight GSP, which then Conor wouldn't even have a belt. GSP would have the middleweight belt and they'd be fighting at welterweight. That just really doesn't make sense to me. So it would either be George St. Pierre defends his middleweight title versus the interim champion Robert Whittaker, or George St. Pierre goes back down to welterweight to try and claim another title versus Tyron Woodley, which is also possible. But it's looking like it's going to be Robert Whittaker, and I think probably arguably, what? I mean, I don't know if he's a bigger star than Woodley just because people don't really like Woodley, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and you know, that does sell. People want to see you lose. And Tyron Woodley might be able to talk some trash to GSP and say, oh, he's been scared and blah, blah, blah. I'm the real welterweight. You know, they could talk some trash, so that would sell. GSP versus Tyron Woodley, I would love that fight as well. But I still think Robert Whittaker versus GSP would sell. I mean, GSP hasn't ever had, you know, it wasn't always 100% necessary for GSP to have trash talk leading up to his fight to sell. I mean, he just came back and it's looking like his numbers, his Madison Square Garden numbers, he's right back to being on top. You know what I'm saying? Over 1 million buys in his first fight back. And you can say, yeah, Joanna helped, TJ and Cody helped, Rose helped, you know, all these other people helped. But the headline was GSP versus Bisping. And GSP, he left as one of the pay-per-view kings and he came back as one of the pay-per-view kings. So there's no reason for us to believe that that would not translate to his Robert Whittaker fight, especially unifying the belts. Put it on a big card. What are you talking about? With that being said, now I really got to get to work. Let the full-time family know what the fuck you tap out in the comments. I'm out.
Bye, Felicia.